Good morning. We'll call this meeting of the House Immigration Committee of the Extraordinary Session into order. Clerk, please take the roll.
Representatives Barrett, Brooks, Carringer, Darby, Dixie, Doggett, Elridge, Fritz, Hakeem, Hurt, Johnson, Jones of Davidson, Lynn, McKenzie, Reedy, Renault, Stevens, Warner, Zachary, Vice Chair Bolso, Chairman Todd. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Welcome, everyone, to this committee. We're going to start off this morning with a prayer and a pledge. I would call on Representative Hurt to lead us in prayer. If you turn your microphone on, they'll turn it on for you. And then I'll ask Representative Warner to lead us in the pledge. So if everyone would stand, I'd appreciate it.
Join me in prayer, please. Dear Lord, we come to you humbly, asking for your wisdom and guidance as we gather here today to make decisions. Dear Lord, please be with us as we go through this day, and please help us to represent all Tennesseans and that your will would be done through us. Please protect the members that are here and the audience that's here, dear Lord. We know we're all here for reasons that we believe in, dear Lord, and please be with each and every one of us as we leave here and guide and protect us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Members, I want to go over a few housekeeping items first this morning. I want to welcome everyone in the audience here this morning, and I want to remind folks that your involvement here is observation only. This is not a participatory sport, and we would ask that you be respectful of those rules. We will have members or have folks that want to testify this morning, and those testimonies are limited to 3 minutes each. So you'll have time to present your thoughts and your comments. And then if members have questions for you, we will engage and we will be speaking one at a time. Members with the new microphone system, be sure and watch. And when the red light comes on your microphone, then it is hot. So then you can speak. So just be watching for that so you don't get cut off early. And also, I want everyone to here on the committee to be respectful of others. And if that goes off the rails, then I will shut you down. We'll close the microphone and go to the next person. So as long as we're respectful, we want to hear from everybody and get your thoughts and your questions in. I believe that covers most everything that I needed to go over. We will be voting by roll call vote because we've got some glitch going on with our new system. So until they figure that out, we will be taking roll call votes for the final action on each bill. Are there any personal orders this morning? Representative Jones, you're recognized.
The mics. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This week we honor National Holocaust Remembrance Day and the 6 million people, Jewish, Roma, Polish, disabled, socialists, LGBTQ, and dissenting clergy who were murdered through a system of laws and policies enacted in Adolf Hitler's Germany. But the Holocaust was not an isolated incident. Instead, it was modeled off the anti-indigenous dispossession and genocide in America and the anti-Black Jim Crow laws of the American South. The systems of separate and unequal second-class citizens became international and left death and horror in its wake. As we remember those who died, honor those who resisted in large-scale events like the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising and in small-scale events like hiding their Jewish neighbors in their attics, a crime punishable by deportation, imprisonment, and death, I leave you these words. Terrible things are happening outside. Poor, helpless people are being dragged out of their homes. Families are torn apart. Men, women, and children are separated. Children come home from school to find that their parents have disappeared. Diary of Anne Frank, January 13th, 1943. May her memory be a blessing, her words a permanent reminder. We will not forget. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other personal orders? Seeing none, Want to remind each member to log in to your microphone station so that your microphone can be activated. All right, hearing no other personal orders, we'll get right into our business. Item number 1 on our calendar is House Bill 6001 by Lamberth. We have a motion and a second? Representative Lamberth, you are recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, this bill deals with the illegal immigration issue that we have now dealt with for several years in this country. For the last 4 years, we've had a virtually open and porous border, and we are suffering from that, unfortunately, as a state. Now with new leadership at the federal level, I hope over the next several years that will no longer be an issue and we will get back to a legal immigration process that works well for everyone in our country, especially, and for folks throughout the world that yearn to come to the greatest nation on the planet. So with that, this bill would create the CIED division, the Centralized Immigration Enforcement Division. It's a couple of positions that will liaison with the federal government to ensure that the folks that are in this state that they are deporting that will leave our country because they were never legally here are illegal immigrants, not legal immigrants or U.S. citizens. We do not want those folks bothered in any way, but that only illegal immigrants will be deported. That coordination with the federal government, I think, is important, and these positions are there for that reason. The Immigration Enforcement Program, also known as the 287G program, we have some incentives in there currently in current law, but they're quite frankly not strong enough to allow for local law enforcement to be able to get state funds to cooperate in the 287G program. What I mean by that is when local law enforcement comes across someone who's an illegal immigrant and they arrest that individual, where they are holding that person on a local crime, a crime of the state of Tennessee. Well, there is also sometimes a federal hold through ICE that can occur. And so at the state of Tennessee, it's really, I think, beneficial for us to put some funds out there that would allow us to be able to bear some of that burden of holding that person until ICE lets the local law enforcement know whether or not they're going to be deporting that individual or not. Not every single person that local law enforcement would come in contact with that has immigration issues will be deported. In my time as an assistant district attorney many years ago, usually this process happened very quickly. Usually we would find out same day or next day if someone that was being in custody of the local jail, if ICE was going to deport them, or if they were like, nope, we're not going to come get that person, do whatever you wish. So we hope to get back to that protocol. Also, our state issued IDs on your driver's license. Your license looks exactly like any legal immigrant to this country's license. Now, the reason that's a problem is because when you sign up for a license, a lot of times they ask you if you want to register to vote. And so we know last year we had about 13,000 people who received letters from the Secretary of State because their immigration status was in question. Several hundred of those individuals then took themselves off the voting rolls. I would presume because after receiving that letter, they realized that it was illegal for them to vote. Only a U.S. citizen can vote in our elections, and only a U.S. citizen should be voting in our elections. I don't want somebody to get caught inadvertently up in a system where they've just gone and gotten a driver's license, which legal residents can do. Illegal immigrants cannot get a license in the state, thank goodness, but legal residents can. That license should look a little different than a U.S. citizen license. That's all this is. It'll be subtle differences, potentially different font, an X on it that's small, something like that. But it would look a little different than a U.S. citizen's license. And that license would be good to operate a motor vehicle in this state, but it would not be good to register to vote, or to obtain any service that only a U.S. citizen could obtain. So that's another aspect of this bill that, again, just put some protections out there. And then lastly, this would also prohibit completely sanctuary cities, and we've done that previously, but this would take it a little bit further. This would also create an e-felony for any local official or state official that tried to create a sanctuary city. We're not going to have that in this state. We're cooperating with federal officials and with state and federal law to deport anyone who is here illegally. So we're not going to have sanctuary cities in this state or any subdivision thereof that is a sanctuary city. So that has criminal penalties and it has removal processes on that if any local official were to go down that road. Mr. Chairman, that's what the bill does.
Thank you for that, Leader Lambert. And I believe you have a couple of amendments that have been filed.
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Would you give me the drafting code of the first one, please?
And Mr. Chairman, I wasn't sure what order these were going to go in. I know there are several other amendments filed. I should have had only one amendment, I believe.
I have 2322. and 2449.
Yes, sir. So one of those is more just kind of a clerical fix. And it allows, well, we'll take these in order, sorry. The 2322 outlines the expenditures of this. It establishes some of the dates in this bill. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second on that amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, we'll put that on the bill. If the committee so desires, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The ayes have it. Amendment goes on the bill. Leader Lamberth?
Yes, and then 2449 just allows for local law enforcement to be able to work under the 287G program and then to protect some confidentiality as part of that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on this amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The ayes have it. This amendment goes on. Anything else you would like to tell the committee as amended?
I'll stand ready for questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. We do have some testimony from the public that we would like to entertain at this time. So let me get my list here of the folks that have signed up, and we'll ask you to come up to one of the tables. We have Ashley Worthington and Aiden Pratt. And the members, we also have members of the Department of Safety here that are available if you have questions. They just wanted to be on the list in case we needed them. So we appreciate them being here for that. So we will get started. We will be, like I said, allowing you 3 minutes to speak. And I guess we'll let Ms. Worthington go first. You are recognized, ma'am. Oh, excuse me. I need to go out of session to hear this. So without objections, we're out of session. Ms. Worthington, you are recognized.
Thank you. My name is Ashley Worthington, and I'm a native. Thank you. My name is Ashley Worthington, and I'm a native Nashvilleian married to a small business owner from Mexico, Alejandro. Together, we built a life in Tennessee, and we are raising our 8-year-old son, Marco. Alejandro is currently going through the legal immigration process to gain permanent residency, but even though he's doing everything right, he is still not insulated from the potential harm of this bill. Immigrants like Alejandro are vital to Tennessee's success. Alejandro built his business from the ground up, paying taxes, hiring employees, and contributing to the state's economy, just like any other Tennessean. In fact, foreign-born entrepreneurs like Alejandro represent 7.8% of Tennessee's business owners, even though they make up only 4.9% of the state's population. In 2018, immigrant-owned businesses generated $731.7 million in business income and provided jobs for tens of thousands of Tennesseans. This is the kind of economic growth we should be nurturing, not undermining with policies that threaten families like mine. But the impact of this bill isn't just economic, it's personal. Like many immigrant families in Tennessee, we live in what's called a mixed status household. In Tennessee, there are more than 70,000 families like mine, where a U.S. citizen is living with at least one undocumented family member. My son, Marco, is one of these children. He is just 8 years old, and he fears for his dad's safety, as well as the safety of his friends and their families. No child should have to carry that kind of worry. The truth is, immigrants are not a threat to Tennessee's safety. They are essential to our workforce and our communities. But with this bill, by focusing on fear and division, we risk driving out hardworking people who are contributing to the state's success. If we push families like mine out of Tennessee, we lose the valuable contributions they make to our economy, our schools, our communities. The fiscal impact of this bill also can't be ignored. The estimated cost exceeds $5.5 million to create the Immigrant Enforcement Division and fund enforcement grants. Local governments will face additional recurring costs, further burdening their budgets, and this doesn't even account for the cost of litigation, which could far exceed the current estimates, as we heard last night during Senate testimony. For a state that prides itself on fiscal responsibility, this bill is a costly move in the wrong direction. It expands government in ways that harm families, waste taxpayer dollars, and erode the very values that make Tennessee great. I come here today so that you can see my face as a native Nashvilleian whose family and future are on the line. Alejandro, Marco, and I are just one example of the many families who contribute to this state and want nothing more than continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Warbington. Any members have any questions for Ms. Warbington? Thank you for being here. Mr. Pratt, excuse me for that. Representative Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, yesterday we heard them both, and so I wasn't ready to raise my hand. So, thank you so much for being here. So, if we were to pass this bill, I mean, can you tell me in reality what this is going to do to your family specifically? How is everyone feeling, and are you making plans as a result?
Ms. Warbington?
Yes, I mean, we are already making plans. Alejandro said to me the other day that he's already feeling unsafe, even though this bill hasn't passed. Obviously, we know what's happening at the federal level. He said he doesn't know if he can make it another 4 years living like this, living in fear. He's afraid every time he drives with our son and I'm not in the car. And to be honest, I'm terrified of that as well, but I can't tell him that because his fear is greater than mine. So of course we are making plans. I mean, he's lost his mother and his father in Mexico. He doesn't really have a life to go back home to, but of course that's in the back of his mind, and planning for that. Additionally, my son's school is majority Latino and those families are scared to death.
Representative Johnson?
Thank you, and I completely understand that. Last week I was in a forum in Knoxville about the special session, and there were a lot of teachers present and teachers that teach ELL, and they're just literally crying to me, Gloria, please, our kids are terrified every day at school. Some aren't coming to school because they are afraid someone's going to come to their school. And so I just through them, I really understand the fear and everything with what is happening. And so I understand that, and I'm so sorry that you all have to go through this. This isn't an immigration bill. This is a mass deportation bill, and it is divisive and full of hate. Thank you.
Representative Lynn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I take it from your testimony that Alejandro came here illegally. He did not apply to the federal government to be able to work in the United States or for citizenship in the United States. Is that true?
Ms. Warbington?
He came here over 20 years ago. He was fleeing violence in his country. He has made a life here in the United States, and built a business and now has a family.
Representative Lynn?
So no, he did not apply to the federal government for U.S. citizenship or for any sort of stay because he was in fear for his life. Now, we as elected officials are sworn to uphold the United States Constitution and all of the laws of the United States, the Tennessee Constitution, and all of the laws of Tennessee. Do you feel that he should have, not even knowing you, not even knowing the wonderful future family that he could have, that he should have made the effort and followed the law to apply to be a citizen of the United States, or at least for some sort of sanctuary so that he could have the protection of the law, because that's what the law is for. The law is to protect everyone. So do you feel that he should have, all those years ago or any time in between, you said over 20 years, applied for citizenship, because it does sound like he would be a valuable citizen, but we have to have everybody following the law. We have to. So can you answer that?
Ms. Worthington?
Respectfully, he did try. Over 20 years ago, things were different here. And it is a misunderstanding that that is easy to change your status once you are here. It is incredibly difficult, and there are very few avenues and ways to do that. It takes a long time also, and it's also incredibly costly. So it is a misunderstanding that that it's easy for someone, like you say, that like Alejandro, that's been a law-abiding member of the community. There are very few avenues. He didn't have any options.
All right, next on the list, we have Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My colleague from Middle Tennessee asked my question.
Okay, thank you, sir. Seeing no other questions, Representative Jones, you're recognized.
Thank you so much for being here, Ms. Worthington, and for your courage to share this story in what can be a very hostile time. I just wanted you to kind of talk more about the difficulties that people have trying to go about this the proper way, even though I sit here on a dais with many of those who are descendants of undocumented immigrants from Europe. I want to ask, as people try and come here today, what are some challenges that they face? How many years does it take? What are some barriers that make legal or quote unquote legal entry? Because I want to be clear that these folks are not crossing the border crossed them. These people are indigenous people coming to their land that had been their land. And so let's just be honest, let's tell some truth here today. But let's talk about, if we use the argument of this committee, some of the difficulties in the traditional legal system, because it is a broken system for a lot of people trying to get here legally. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Representative Jones and Ms. Worthington, we are not here to debate the immigration system per se. This bill does not have to do with that. So if you could limit your comments and your questions to what this bill is actually about. Ms. Worthington, you're recognized.
Thank you. Well, I can speak a little bit more to our situation. We've been dealing with this immigration process since 2017. And like I said, when he came here, there were no options for him to change his legal status. He spoke to multiple immigration attorneys, and there are very few avenues. And one of those avenues is if you are married to a U.S. citizen, if you can find an employer to sponsor you. Those are two of the ways that you can change your immigration status here. But many of these families have been here. The majority of immigrants have been here for over 15 years. Can you imagine building a life here, somewhere where you were looking for safety, for a better life, and then being asked to leave? I just can't even imagine that. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Thank you for that, Ms. Worthington. We're going to hear now from Mr. Pratt. Yeah. Mr. Pratt, you're recognized.
Okay, even though Vincent has hand up. Good morning, Chairman and members of this committee. I'm here to stand and represent my former colleagues who do not have legal citizenship status. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. My name is Aiden, and I'm here to express my strong opposition to House Bill 601. Well, I understand the bill is intended to address the concerns about immigration enforcement. I believe it will do more harm than good to Tennessee's communities, economy, and values we hold dear. First of all, let's talk about the economic impact. Immigrants, both documented and undocumented, are an integral part of Tennessee's workforce system. According to a 2021 report from the American Immigration Council, immigrants represent 8% of the state's population, but contribute significantly more in labor force participation, making up nearly 9% of the state's workforce. Specifically, they fill essential jobs in agriculture, construction, healthcare, service industries, and sectors that are facing labor shortages already. This bill by Leader Lambert could exacerbate these shortages by pushing hardworking individuals out of workforces. Studies show that restricting access to jobs for immigrants could lead up to a significant loss of revenue for the state, with some estimates suggesting a $1.3 billion loss in the state GDP. Furthermore, businesses could face rising labor costs as they struggle to fill positions, which could lead to higher prices for our consumers, inflation as y'all should know it as. Secondly, I'd like to address the human cost of this bill. This bill would place an undue burden on immigrant families, separating them, causing fear in the communities. It could discourage people from seeking necessary medical attention, sending their children to school, or even reporting crimes. In fact, the effects of similar legislation in other states have shown a marked decline in public safety because immigrant communities are afraid of being targeted or deported and are less likely to cooperate with law enforcement. Tennessee has always been a state that prides itself on compassion and hospitality, but this policy does not show those values. Let us not forget the legal and constitutional issues this bill represents. By prioritizing deportation over integration, it encourages discriminatory practices that go against the principles of fairness and equality under the law. It's important that we continue to focus on solutions that offer a pathway for immigrants to contribute legally and fully to our society, not policies that push them into the shadows. While I understand the concerns of this bill and what it tries to do, this bill is nothing more than fascism in disguise.
Next on my list, I have Representative Dixie, and you may ask either person the question. Just make sure we know who you're asking, please.
Ms. Warbington, a quick question for you. You said you've been going through this process for your husband to become a legalized citizen. Can you tell me some of the costs that are associated with this? And I'm imagining that when he came, that he probably didn't have much money when he came, little to none. So I'm wondering what are some of those costs associated with it?
Representative Dixie, this bill doesn't deal with anything related to that. Unless you can show me what relation this has to this bill, I don't think we'll entertain that kind of a question.
Well, we talked about some of the obstacles of becoming, one of my colleagues asked why he was not able to start the process. So I'm asking, and she stated that some of the cost was a prohibitive. I'm wondering what some of those costs are. So I'm following up on a question that my colleague asked.
Well, I'm going to give you a few seconds to answer that question, but from this point forward, the questions are going to be related to this bill as amended. That's what we're here to debate, not a bigger picture or another bill that's going to be filed later or the one that was filed last year. This is about this bill. So Ms. Warbington, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you. And you are correct. When he came here, he had maybe a few dollars to his name. But for example, we have filled out the I-30. That's been approved. That cost $500. That goes to the federal government. We've also filled out the I-601A, and that's another $500, not to mention the thousands of dollars that we have to pay to an immigration attorney.
Thank you for that. Representative Dixie, do you have a follow-up? Thank you. Representative Hakeem?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If it's appropriate, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to get some clarity from you. Earlier, in regards to a question, you stated this is not about the immigration system, but I think I'm correct in that this bill modifies the immigration process, a system within the state of Tennessee. I'm trying to be clear as, trying to deal with what questions I can deal with and what is not appropriate.
Thank you for that question. I do not see, well, first of all, we don't have an immigration system in the state of Tennessee. That's not our purview. What this bill deals with is how our local law enforcement and our state assist ICE. The public will refrain from comments or you will be removed. And I'd rather not do that. We want you here, but this is not a participatory sport. Please, no more warnings. So Representative Hakeem, does that answer your question? You're recognized.
At the moment, sir, if I may direct a question to Ms. Worthington. How would you classify your husband? Would you, now I'm just posing a question, not implying or inferring anything. Would you consider him a criminal, a tax-paying citizen, a hard worker? How do you classify your husband from that perspective?
Ms. Worthington?
He's incredibly hardworking. Started a business himself, barely being able to navigate English, and found clients, with his limited English, and has now built it into a very successful business.
Thank you for that, Representative King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, next on my list, I have Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my question's for the young man. First, I'll precede that with thank you for the courage to come out and testify today. I appreciate that. I would offer this, that you mentioned a word that we often misdefine. I can't find that word fascism anywhere in this bill. This bill is simply intended to establish an interface so that the state of Tennessee can be part of the solution to this illegal invasion that we've suffered under for some years now. And so my question to you is this: you talked about this bill somehow prevented human beings from seeking medical care. And I just wonder, why is it you think that this prevents human beings from seeking medical care? And is that any different, since folks that are here illegally are criminals? Is it any different than that person who has robbed a bank or held up a liquor store would not go seek medical attention? I'll wait for your answer.
Mr. Pratt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative. The reason I believe this would stop them from seeking medical attention, because as a licensed CNA/patient care technician, working in the hospitals, I have seen what happens, especially now that Trump has allowed for hospitals no longer to be a safe haven for these undocumented citizens. They will be reported, and it's by law that we have to report them because we are mandated reporters. It's the same way that if a patient told me that they wanted to kill themselves, that I would have to report that to the state of Tennessee. Y'all would then come in there and y'all would then detain them and deport them by force. That is unsafe. And do you really think an undocumented citizen is going to go in a hospital to seek medical attention knowing that is what's going to happen? And also, I never seen the word invasion in this bill either. So I guess we're both making up words today.
All right, we have a request from a committee member to hear from the Department of Safety. So, Mr. Pratt, Ms. Worthington? Oh, it's on something else? Okay. Well, thank you for your testimony today. And so we may delay until we get a little more clarity on that. And since we're out of session and this question is related to the bill as amended, if the department would come to the microphones, then I'll recognize Representative Renaud.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on Section 6 in this, on the bill, as it relates to the sanctuary policy, city policy. Can you tell me who determines what a sanctuary city policy is?
Ms. Herger, you're recognized.
Representative, that may be better answered by the chairman, as those are locally established, is my understanding, and the department's role in this bill is the creation of this new division and the distribution of grants. So I wouldn't want to overstep and try to speculate on that section of the bill. It just doesn't pertain to our department.
Representative Renaud.
Sorry. As a state, we already have a policy against sanctuary cities. Who enforces that in the event, if in the event a city were to violate that?
Ms. Stroker.
It would be my understanding, as with any violation of a law, that the local DA would be the one in charge of prosecution.
Any further questions, Ms. Renaud? Okay. Representative McKenzie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just trying to get a feel for what this, is this going to be let me ask a series of questions. Help me get a feel for the structure. Is this going to be a department what kind of staff are we looking at? Are you going to have one in each grand division? Are you going to focus on the rural areas where, a lot of the work probably takes place? And then what's the pay scale for this? Are these going to be law enforcement type people, lawyers? Just want to get a feel for this. This does a lot, right? For what this organization will look like, and then who does it report to?
Mr. Stroker, two things. One, I forgot to have you introduce yourself and who you're with. And secondly, that button doesn't work. It's only activated up here. So save you a little trouble.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're recognized.
Elizabeth Stroger, Legislative Director, as well as the Assistant General Counsel for the Department of Safety. And I'm going to try to follow along. And I may want to start by saying that 287G is something that is currently allowed. The Department of Safety actually had a 287G program up until about 15 years ago. And so this is not creating that program. That is not a new concept. And what it is a division that will be within the Department of Safety that will report to the Commissioner of Safety. I believe the fiscal note calls for staffing of 4 individuals. And what the division will actually be doing is coordinating with local and federal government and law enforcement agencies for any immigration questions that may come up or any questions relative to the involvement of the 287G program, as well as there is created a grant disbursement program, and that will be the main function of the department, is to disperse that grant money to those local entities that participate in the 287G program if they so choose to. I don't know if I've answered everything, but.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you. Yeah, that gives me a lot. So in my county, Knox County, we've had a 287G program for a long time. Does that program, what's your interaction with that, and what kind of numbers, if you do interact, well, what kind of numbers have we done? Hopefully, if that's the case, we should have, we got one county in program, y'all have 4 statewide. So what does that look like in terms of whatever your measure of success is?
Ms. Stroker, you're recognized.
I'm not sure if I need to wait for you, so I want to make sure I respect that. So there are 2 counties that have 287G programs right now. Knox is one of them. Currently, there is no interaction between our department and that entity because that 287G MOU is done in connection with the federal government, that contract. What this bill would create would be an avenue for that county, as well as any others who may contract for 287G, to reach out for the department's assistance, as well as any grant funding that may be needed to implement their 287G program.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Final question. So I think you said that that state had a 287G program at one point. Why did you stop?
Ms. Stroker.
It's my understanding, as well as a lot of other programs within the state, that that contract was not renegotiated with on the federal level.
Representative McKenzie, you finished? Okay. Next on the list, I have Representative Warner. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stroker, does the Department of Safety have any numbers up to this date of how many illegals that have been deported from the state of Tennessee and out of the country?
Stroker, you're recognized.
The department does not have that type of information. The department currently does not have access to that immigration system. So I cannot provide that information to you.
Representative Warner.
Does the department have any information or statistics on how many times they've contacted ICE in the past 4 years?
Ms. Stroker.
That could be something we could potentially look at, but I would have to get back to you on that and ask THP if they have that type of information and what that information is.
Representative Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have at this time.
Okay, thank you. Next on my list, I have Representative Dixie.
Old habits die hard. Keep hitting the button. A quick question for you. Under the section that says requires the local government that creates a Class C felony for a state or local official to adopt or enact a sanctuary policy. Now, it requires the Attorney General or reporter to initiate action. My question to you is the Department of Safety responsible for the enforcement, or how will that work? And you may or may not know the answer to that. I was just curious.
Ms. Strucker?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, that piece would have to, the department does not have prosecutorial enforcement provisions. That would be up to those local entities who are responsible for, prosecuting crime. So your DA's conference, things like that. They would be the ones who would be responsible for carrying out any criminal prosecution.
Representative Dixie?
As an attorney, I guess, that having to deal with this, has there ever been a circumstance where a elected official could be charged with a felony for the way that they vote?
Ms. Strucker?
Again, I cannot answer that because we do not prosecute criminals within our department or prosecute any crimes. You'd have to ask the DA's conference for that information.
Representative Dixie?
Thank you. Thank you.
Next, I have Representative Johnson. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this may be a question not for you. But what I'm curious about, where will folks, when detained, where will they be housed? Are there room in our jails for these folks to safely be housed, or will they be in state prisons? Where is that going to happen?
Ms. Strucker?
And again, there's a lot of things I won't be able to answer just because it's a pretty large bill that covers some various subjects. That would be a better question for your chiefs or your sheriffs. I believe that would be something that they would be in control of, and whether or not they have that space.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. I thought it might be out of your range, but I think it's something that we need to know, because what I'm hearing from so many is how crowded the jails are already, and people need to be kept safely. And so I think that's something we need to find out before we pass this bill. Thank you.
And Representative Hakeem?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm one of those also. Don't know if this is in your purview, but we want to ask it. We in the legislature, during the process of dealing with a bill, we also attempt to look at what's called unintended consequences. And in an area that we're looking at now, the impact on our local economy, I don't know if that's something that your department would study, the impact on the economy, on the people involved, on those communities. Firstly, do you participate in any of that?
Representative Keem, that's getting a little bit outside. I'll let Ms. Strucker answer, but I already know the answer, but it's getting a little off, but go ahead, Ms. Strucker.
Yeah, that wouldn't be something that the department would have any knowledge of to local economic impact. No, sir.
Representative Hakeem?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At some point, I would like to find out who the person or persons I need to talk to in regards to a question like that. Thank you.
Representative Brooks, you're recognized.
Thank you. Good morning. I want to ask, what protocols are in place to protect U.S. citizen children from being orphaned or placed in foster care due to parental detention and deportation under this bill?
Ms. Strucker, you're recognized.
So this bill doesn't dictate deportation requirements. That would be done at that federal level. So I cannot answer that question.
Representative Brooks?
Okay, thank you.
Representative Warner?
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stroker, do you know how many, or has, I guess, first of all, let me ask a question. Has the state interacted or started working with ICE in any way at this point?
Ms. Strucker?
I don't know the answer to that personally. I would have to go back and ask our department team what interactions they have had. I'm assuming you mean within the past month or so. I just don't know that answer right now. I'd have to go back and ask.
Representative Warner?
One last follow-up. What about ICE agents in the state? Does the Department of Safety know how many ICE agents are in the state?
Ms. Strucker?
Again, we might. I just need to go back and ask our team. And I can get all these questions for you and I'll distribute it to the committee.
Thank you for that. Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to thank the department for working with Leader Lamberth on the driver's license portion of this bill. This is something that obviously we worked on last year and weren't able to get it across the finish line. So glad to see this iteration come back. And I think this is going to be something that's very helpful. So just wanted to make that comment to thank the department for working with us on that.
Representative Brooks, you're recognized.
So will all citizens need new ID in additional to the real ID?
Ms. Strugger.
So I'm trying to make sure that it turns red before I speak. So this does not change who would or would not need identification. That is solely up to any individual if they so wish to obtain an ID or a driver's license. This is only changing for lawful permanent residents. They will receive a temporary license with a distinct marker on it.
Representative Brooks.
Thank you.
Representative Hakeem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the more I thought about this, maybe out of our guest's purview, if I have a question that maybe needs to go through legal, would I be able to ask that question at some point, sir?
Certainly, this would be a good time.
Okay, all right. In the bill that is proposed, criminal penalties for officials who adopt sanctuary policies and subsequent requirements. Is that legal in the state of Tennessee or, the federal constitution? I mean, we make policies, whether people like them or not. And so I'm just asking, is that legal?
Mr. Mundy, recognize you. If you could identify yourself, please.
Thank you, Matt Mundy from Legal. I do think that the application of the criminal penalty to certain categories or classes of local officials would be problematic constitutionally. Generally speaking, we have the speech and debate clause in the federal and the state constitution that protects legislators and gives them legislative immunity. There's also a common law immunity for deliberative bodies, and that has been determined by the courts to apply to lesser legislative bodies such as regional boards, city councils, county commissions. And so I think that that could be potentially problematic if you tried to apply the criminal penalty to those types of local officials. However, there'd be other officials to which it would apply, such as like a county mayor, a city mayor, if they were to issue an executive order trying to enact a sanctuary policy, a school superintendent, officials like that, the criminal provision would be applicable.
Representative Hakeem.
Okay. Thank you very much for your response. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I don't have anybody else on my list while we're out of session. So without objection, we will go back into session. Thank you, Ms. Stroger. We are back in session and we are on the bill as amended. I have Representative Zachary on my list. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, something in Leader Lamberth we have not talked about as we've started this debate. And if Leader Lamberth did mention it, please forgive me. And again, please forgive me if I miscite this because I'm not used to citing U.S. Code. 8 U.S. Code Section 1325 makes clear that any alien who enters or attempts to enter the United States at any time or place other than designated by immigration officers excludes examination, inspection by immigration officers, or attempts to enter, obtain entry to the United States by willfully false or misleading representation or willful concealment of material fact, on and on, has committed illegal entry. We're a nation of laws. We on this body are sworn to uphold those laws, and it is illegal to enter the United States if you are violating that section. And Mr. Chairman and Leader, I think this bill is extremely important. Well, not only because we have taken a constitutional oath to uphold the laws, but because of the impact illegal immigration has on Tennessee. According to FAIR, the Federation for American Immigration Reform, there are roughly, as of 2023, 162,000 illegal aliens in this country. That is an annual cost to Tennesseans of $971 million. to the people that we represent. And we are here because of the failure of the last administration over the last 4 years. Over the last 4 years, we have had roughly 20 million illegal immigrants enter this nation. And Mr. Chairman and members, the reason we are passing this bill is because of the impact. The reason we're passing this bill is because of the failure of their last administration. And I'd reached out to Congressman Green, who's our former colleague, who is chairman of Homeland Security, and he provided these numbers to me, which I think are staggering. Over the last 4 years, Mr. Chairman, Tren de Aragua, which is a Venezuelan gang, was non-existent on U.S. soil prior to the previous administration. They have now spread to 17 states.
Representative Zachary.
Mr. Chairman,
you're out of order. This is on the bill. This bill talks about reporting. Representative Jones, you are not recognized. You are not recognized. This is about criminal activity. It's in the bill. Representative Zachary, do you remember? You will resume in just a moment. Sergeant at Arms, would you please step over here? And the first person that says anything from the audience, I want them removed. Thank you. Representative Zachary, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, just to finish my point, and again, this information is directly from Homeland Security, from Chairman Green's office. Just talking about the crime and the reason that we have to pass this legislation to allow us to work with the Trump administration to remove those who are illegally here in our state. Total convictions for illegal immigrant DUIs rose from 364 in year 2020 to 2,493 in year 2023. Since the start of fiscal year 21, the Border Patrol has recorded 43,674 arrests of illegal aliens. That was a 99% increase over the year before. Mr. Chairman, I'll spare the committee some of these additional statistics because it goes on and it proves the point. Our Tennesseans, the people that we represent, are significantly impacted by illegal immigration. I talked to Sheriff Spangler, Knox County, was mentioned earlier. He is working on the numbers now for the illegals that he has in our prisons. He's going to provide that to me. This piece of legislation is extremely important because it protects Tennesseans. It saves Tennesseans significant dollars, but more importantly, it reinforces U.S. Code 81325 that is on the books. We as a body took an oath to the Constitution to defend the Constitution and the laws of this nation. And that's why this piece of legislation is important. I appreciate you running it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that. And Representative Warner, I'm going to recognize you. And then when we get through with your comments or questions, we do have some other amendments that we need to recognize. So I'll recognize you and then we'll do that. And then we'll keep moving with others that we have on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back at this time.
Okay, we'll come back to you a little bit later. So members, we do have another amendment. There's one here by Representative Fritz. Representative Fritz, you're recognized to let us know what the drafting code is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have code 2479er.
That's what we have, sir. Do I have a motion on the amendment? We have a motion and a second on the amendment. You're recognized to tell us about the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was actually a piece of legislation we worked on last year. We saw a deficiency in information and data that we were sharing across our state with local law enforcement. When I met with my sheriffs and police chiefs, most all of them said that they would like more information regarding criminal activity of illegals in our state. And so we crafted this in concert with Department of Safety and Commissioner Long himself, as a matter of fact. I think it's a necessary thing. We've heard a couple questions here today, Mr. Chairman, about data. I think data is important. Certainly, when we have had, as my colleague from Knox County mentioned just a moment ago, not just human beings, but criminal gangs come into these United States and into Tennessee. And drug trafficking, human trafficking, which is something that should appall all of us, has been increased by this lawless border condition that was allowed to exist. And so we crafted this to, again, develop a reporting, a discussion under code, if you will, between the Department of Safety and our local law enforcement. I stand that that's something we still need, but what I don't want to do is impede with the progress of what I think is a very good bill. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I hope that we'll continue these conversations on how to better equip our local law enforcement, making sure that they are apprised of all the data that's available. And I will withdraw this amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, without objection, motion is withdrawn. The next amendment we have before us is amendment number 4. Representative Hakeem, you're recognized to give us that drafting code.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is 2266.
Okay, that is what I have. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
We have a motion. Do I have a second? We have a second. You're recognized on that amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. What this bill attempts to do is to, in a sense, slow down the process enough that we're not dealing with emotion and overreaction by appointing a commission made up of both Democrats and Republicans that can calmly sit down and look at the facts and not be, I guess I use that term, so moved by emotion. There are hardworking people who have come to this from all over the world, who have come to this country, have not violated the law other than coming here, not knowing the process, just trying to make a living for themselves and their families. So essentially, one of the things we're trying to do, this would be done, put together by the speakers, both House and Senate, and the leaders are involved in that process. And we're asking that we give that consideration because sometimes we can react in such a way that it unintentionally harms people, families. The emotional impact of dividing families or removing family members, is something that scars particularly children. So we'd ask you to take that into consideration. With that, Mr. Chairman, we'd ask that this amendment be made a part of the bill.
Thank you, sir. Now call on Chairman Bolso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In accordance with House Rule 25, I move to lay this amendment on the table.
We have a motion and a second to lay this on the table. That cuts off all debate except for that of the sponsor of the amendment. So Representative Hakeem, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, let us attempt to do something in this realm that we're in a bipartisan way, in a way that takes the emotion out of it, and let us not demonize one another in this process, even those persons who may be here illegally. And we often talk about crime. The vast number of people who come here have not been involved in crime. So let's not put all persons in one basket. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that. We'll be voting on the tabling motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed? No. The ayes have it. Motion is tabled. Next on the list, we have an amendment by Representative Dixie. You're recognized to tell us that drafting code.
002263.
Thank you, sir. You're recognized. Do I have a motion? We have a motion and a second. You're recognized, sir.
All right, thank you. This amendment seeks to keep government entities and state and federal immigration laws from 1,000 feet of some of our most sacred places, such as schools, places of worship, hospitals, and other areas that are critical to public well-being. I think we deserve to protect our children. They come into schools. We have to worry. We talk a lot about mental health and the trauma that this would bring up on them, having to witness this or experience this. We have to ask, what purpose does this serve by coming into a school or to a church to apprehend someone because just of their status? Especially when we come into schools, it's going to interrupt learning. If we stop the learning process of these students and these children, what are we creating? We're not giving them an outlet in order to improve their status, because due to no due to no fault of their own, they've broken no law. So why are we punishing them? And then, in essence, is where would they go? Do they go to a jail? Do they go to a detention center? So I think it's important that we add this amendment to this bill to make sure that we protect some of our most sacred places for our children, which are schools and places of worship, and then hospitals for the aforementioned reasons about why of safety and why people may not seek health. So with that, I ask for a passage of this amendment.
Thank you, Representative Dixie. Representative Bolso, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In accordance with House Rule 25, I move to lay this amendment on the table.
We have a motion and a second to table this amendment. Representative Dixie, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I ask that we look at the families and that we talk so much about the nuclear family and our children and protecting them and mental health. How best can we protect them if we don't have a place for them where they can go and for at least a few hours of a day not be burdened with the trauma that exists outside of that building, a school building or a church. So I implore you not to vote for tabling this, but in order to add this, I think this enhances the bill and it makes it a better bill and puts it in a better form that maybe we can makes it a little bit more palatable for us, even though in this tumultuous time, because we're going to punish children for no reason. And again, my biggest concern is if they're removed from the school, where do they go? And so I think we need to think through the process and please consider this motion.
Thank you for that. We'll be voting now on the tabling motion. All in favor to table, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The ayes have it. Motion is tabled. Next, we have Representative McKenzie, an amendment. If you would give us that drafting code, sir, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That code is 2267.
That's what I have, sir. You're recognized. Do I have a motion on the amendment?
Motion.
We have a motion and a second. So you're recognized, sir, to tell us about the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is really timely. I appreciate it when we were out of session, and I hope everyone on the committee heard our legal advice. We have some good lawyers, and they do a good job. And I think when the question came up about constitutionality, the part that he referenced about it not being constitutional is what I'm trying to correct with this amendment. What this amendment does is to basically hold harmless those of us who give of our valuable time, whether it's local or state, to represent our people in a way that we deem fit to say, hey, we're not going to arrest you for representing your people and what your people are wishing to do. So this is fairly simple. It simply allows a locally elected or statewide elected persons to vote their conscience and what their people are telling them to do, and not at risk of being jailed. So with that, I ask for approval.
Thank you, sir. Representative Olso, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In accordance with House Rule 25, I move to lay this amendment on the table.
Second. We have a motion and a second to table this motion. We'll go back to Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's amazing that folks that represent the legal community, both in this House and working for this House, are not violently jumping up and down and agreeing with this amendment. This amendment is trying to get this bill back into a constitutional state. This will not hold up in a court of law, be it conservative or liberal. This is a bad part of a bill. This is damaging to us. It was Plato that said the price that men at the time, he said, have for being not involved in advocating public service is to be ruled by evil men. We need good people in our offices. We need people that we don't always agree with in our offices. I lose a bunch of votes here, and that doesn't bother me because we have a voice and a vote. But to say that my vote can now put me or a local city council or local county commission at risk of being jailed because we voted contrary to this particular bill is a shame. So again, I ask this body to consider not tabling this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We will now be voting on the tabling motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The ayes have it. The motion is tabled. Next, we have another amendment by Representative McKenzie. You're recognized to give us that drafting code.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This one is 2269.
Yes, sir. That's what I have. You may, with a motion and a second.
Motion.
We have a motion and a second. So you are recognized to describe your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is one, if we're listening, we can all get behind. If we've listened, I've been here, I'm entering my 5th year here, and we have our sheriffs come here annually, and they'll come again and talk about with the state prisoners that they're housing, how they're crowding their jails, how they are in Knox County, we're under a court order not to exceed a certain amount. And our state prisoners are already crowding the jails, and we're paying them a third to half of what it costs to house those people that are state people. We're going to add to that number with this piece of legislation. We don't know how many times. We just don't know. It's probably X squared or more, depending on how voracious the county wants to be. But what this does, what this amendment does, is to say, this takes money. It's a bad bill. We can agree or disagree on that, but it's going to increase the cost of doing business. And our state, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to hit a plateau in terms of our money going in and going out. So what this bill does is say, we need matching funds from the federal government. This is a federal issue, as my colleague from Knox County pointed out, with all these U.S. codes and his congressman office that brought this information, or a congressman office that brought this information about how all the federal rules, this is a federal thing. So what I'm asking is that we take federal dollars to support this particular piece of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Chairman Bolso, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In accordance with House Rule 25, I move to lay this amendment on the table.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to table this amendment. We will now go back to Representative McKenzie for final comment.
I'm just amazed at how much we blame federal government under certain administrations and praise federal government under other administrations. How we talk about fiscal conservativeness and about how we as Tennesseans are, regardless of office, who's in office, we will have a balanced budget. It's in our DNA. It's codified. But how we continually turn down money that would do us good for some political reason. This is simply saying, follow the money. If this is a federal program, there needs to be some cost sharing with this federal program. This is a border bill. They didn't come into Tennessee. They didn't do that. They came in through a border, unless they was stowed away in the luggage compartment of a plane. They came in through a border, which is a federal program. Our tax dollars, wise or not, funds these border programs. And everyone, a lot of people on this committee are excited about the next 4 years and what's going to happen with our border. But that comes at a cost. And all this amendment is doing is saying, we as Tennesseans, we as a fiscally conservative state, if we're true to that, and I am, if we're true to that, let's put petty partisan politics aside and say, we need to be compensated for our overcrowded jails, for our overcrowded, I guess you're going to take old schools and malls or wherever. We need to be compensated for that. So with that, I'll implore you all to consider not tabling this for purely partisan reasons. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We'll now be voting on the tabling motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The ayes have it. Motion is tabled. Next, we have Representative Jones, and if you are recognized to give us that drafting code, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is drafting code 2552.
Thank you for that. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
We have a motion and a second. You're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment similar to one file, but slightly different. It's seeking to get rid of section 6 provision, which states it is unlawful for an official to violate subsection A. A violation of subsection A is a Class E felony. For the purpose of this subsection, each official who in their capacity as a member of the governing body of a local government votes in the affirmative to adopt a sanctuary policy is in violation of this section. And so it's to remove this provision to charge people with a felony for voting their conscience. And the reason I say this is that my colleague on the right of me here from Knox County stated that we have an oath to uphold the Constitution. And if we go to Article 1, Section 6, there's a speech and debate clause, which comes from the 1689 English Bill of Rights, which was a response to the British Crown's history of using legal measures to intimidate and punish legislators for legislative action. So the English king was punishing lawmakers in Parliament for how they voted. And so our founders had the wisdom to say, let's protect legislators from being charged criminally for their official legislative acts. There is no other law in the state of Tennessee where if we vote, that you can be charged with a Class E felony. Imagine if this was on the other foot. Imagine if we were in the majority and I would charge my members of this committee with felonies every time there's a mass shooting for voting for crazy gun laws. Imagine we charge you with a felony for that. Imagine if we charge you for a felony for voting for laws that are killing people because they don't have access to healthcare. Imagine if we charge you for a felony for that. And so this is a very dangerous slope. And one day the shoe will flip in this state. And when you're in the minority, you want to ask yourself if this is the precedent you want to start. The Senate Judiciary Chairman had the wisdom to offer this very same amendment, who was a Republican, because he saw that this was unconstitutional. He listened to the attorneys. And so if you take your oath seriously, I would say let us not adopt this immediate lawsuit that will come from this legislation. Secondly, there are no sanctuary cities in Tennessee. But it is so interesting to me that this statute here is particularly going after sanctuary policies, because the word sanctuary comes from the Latin word sanctuarium, which means holy. And so we have people here who, if this was in effect, would be criminalizing houses of worship from being places of refuge from persecution. So what this reminds me of is to be quite honest, the fugitive slave codes, where people were charged on the Underground Railroad for doing what was moral, for doing what was just. And now this is the only time we're going to have in Tennessee law that says if you vote in the affirmative, you will be charged with a felony. Well, I wish that I was in a local government, because I would file a bill immediately, because you have no constitutional right to go after local officials for doing their job, which their constituents sent them up there to do, which is vote as their district represents. And my district is very different than many of your districts. My district is one of the most diverse districts. I was just at a high school in my district where there's over 62 languages spoken, with kids who some of their parents are undocumented. That's not scary. That's not something to be terrified of. And so let's take our constitutional oath seriously. to the representative who is going to speak from Williamson County. As an attorney, let's take our constitutional oath seriously and not create a slippery slope of prosecuting people based off of how they vote when it's voting the conscience of their district. Because the only time we've seen in history that elected officials have been targeted for how they vote are in authoritarian regimes. This is un-American. This bill is immoral. It's constitutionally inconsistent. It's economically indefensible because there's going to be litigation and automatic lawsuits filed because of this legislation. And so this is, again, to remove the provision charging people with a crime for voting their conscience. And I hope that you will consider it, particularly those who are so keen to bring up the Constitution when it's convenient, but so prone to ignore it when our very own attorney, who's nonpartisan, non-political, who serves all of us, told us, friends, listen, this bill is unconstitutional if this stays in it. Let's heed the advice of legal counsel and do our legislative duty and our oath to the citizens of Tennessee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Bolso, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In accordance with House Rule 25, I move to lay this amendment on the table.
We have a motion and a second to table this amendment, and we will hear from the sponsor one more time if he chooses. Representative Jones.
We might as well take the Constitution and rip it up, because that's what you're doing. You're creating a very dangerous precedent of attacking the speech and debate clause of the U.S. Constitution. We took an oath just a few weeks ago to vote against any legislation that is injurious to the people and erodes their rights and privileges. You are violating your oath to both the U.S. Constitution and the Tennessee Constitution, and it is shameful what is happening here today. This is serious. We're going after elected officials based on how they vote. Imagine, we've already tried to expel them based on what they say. Now we're going after people for how they vote. This is wrong. It's a violation of everything we stand for. And so we just did the Pledge of Allegiance. That was we might as well just take that down now, because this is un-American. This is the root of it. You can say all the other stuff about this bill, but this provision in particular about charging people with a Class E felony based off of, it says here in the law, every elected official local government who votes in the affirmative shall be charged with a Class E felony. This is what the law says that you have drafted, which legal told you is incorrect, which is unconstitutional, which is going to be constitutionally suspect. And the thing is, it's not just in the U.S. Constitution. Our very own Tennessee Constitution has a very similar provision to this that protects legislators. It says individual legislators are immune from any kind of suit, including criminal prosecutions, for any act deemed as part of the legislative body's deliberative process. This is from the Tennessee State Constitution. Tennessee courts have repeatedly upheld this precedent. And so again, if you want to pass a lawsuit, that's on you. But I hope that we have record of everyone who votes against this, because we want you all to be the first brought before the courts to explain the constitutionality of this, because it is unconstitutional. We have told you this. You're going to vote however you want to vote, because this is not about immigration, because as the chairman said, we don't have any purview over immigration. This is about fear mongering. This is about giving red meat and acting like you're doing something when it's just about targeting both elected officials and individuals in our districts, because people are afraid that America is changing and becoming more diverse. Well, beloved, let us know that this diversifying of America is not a threat to any of us. It's something that makes this nation great. And if we want to vote on all these provisions, we might as well take down that lady in the harbor that says, "Give me your poor, your tired, your huddled masses." And would you please present to me your grandparents' immigration papers when they came? Because let's check the record of where they came from. Because unless your last name is Cherokee, Choctaw, Shawnee, or Yuchi, you are an immigrant from somewhere in Tennessee. And so again, this is unconstitutional. You've been warned. You're going to do this vote however you want to do it, but it's shameful. And the citizens of Tennessee deserve serious deliberation of people who take our constitutional oath seriously.
We'll be voting on the tabling motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Ayes have it. Motion is tabled. That brings us back to the bill as amended, and we have a few questions for the sponsor. Have Representative Warner on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back again. Thank you.
Okay. Next, I have Representative Renaud.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Leader Lamberth, we had talked about this bill, and I thought there was going to be a sunset provision put in it. Did I miss that someplace?
Leader, you're recognized in just a second.
Let me find the right section here. Wanted to check with legal just to make sure. So on the morning. Sections 1 through 8, Section
Excuse me,
15 of this
Leader.
act shall take effect
Leader.
July 1st, 2025.
Excuse me. Sergeant at Arms, would you remove the lady that's talking? And the next snapping, you're leaving as well. This is not a participatory sport. The first four ladies there, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, from there over, have all been snapping and being disruptive. We will take a brief recess. We will recess for 2 minutes. Members, we are back in session with the House the House Immigration Committee of the extraordinary session. Leader Lamberth, you are recognized.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Before all that, I've been asked a question about the sunset by Representative Renault. And on Amendment Coded 2322 that we have adopted, Sections 6 and 16 take effect upon becoming law. Sections 1, 2, 5, and 9 take effect upon becoming law, but expire on January 20th at 11:59 a.m. unless reauthorized by the General Assembly prior to such time and date. By that time, I hope that the mission of making sure that all illegal immigrants have been removed from the country would be accomplished.
Representative Renault.
Thank you, Leader. Another question I had was on Section 6 of the bill regarding the sanctuary city policy. Can you clarify who determines what a sanctuary city policy is? So, for example, if a city maybe doesn't call it a sanctuary city policy, but the citizens believe that it either lends to one, that's what I want clarification on. And then if that occurs, what is a procedure for a citizen to call that and get action on the issue?
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that is specified directly in a TCA code 768-102. Someone keeps hitting that. Hang on. So in TCA 768-102, it specifies what a sanctuary policy is in subsection 4. It says any directive, order, ordinance, resolution, practice, or policy, whether formally enacted, informally adopted, or otherwise effectuated, that limits or prohibits any local government entity or official from communicating and cooperating with federal agencies or officials to verify or report the immigration status of an alien, grants to aliens unlawfully present in the United States the right to lawful presence within the boundaries of this state in violation of federal law, violates 8 U.S.C. 1373, restricts in any way or imposes any conditions on a state or local government entity's cooperation or compliance with detainers from the United States Department of Homeland Security or other successor agency to maintain custody of any alien or to transfer any alien to the custody of the United States Department of Homeland Security or other successor, and then requires the United States Department of Homeland Security or other successor agency to obtain a warrant or demonstrate probable cause before complying with detainers from the department to maintain custody of any alien. And then in F, prevents law enforcement agencies from requiring as a citizenship of immigration status of any person. That is the definition of a sanctuary policy. Now, if enacted as a criminal penalty, then each district attorney has the constitutional authority in this state and their discretion to either pursue, based on the facts that are presented to them by law enforcement, a prosecution of an individual or not. And they have sole discretion on that. At the end of the day, a judge or a jury of their peers would make a determination as to whether or not the facts of each individual case would match up with this law and the bill that we are debating today.
Thank you, Leader. Representative Renault.
What about, so a citizen could take that to a DA if they believe something was being violated, that would be the procedure. Okay, thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that. Next on my list, I have Deputy Speaker Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move previous question.
We have a motion and a second for previous question. We have objections, so we'll be on a roll call vote for previous question. There is no debate on that. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll. You're out of order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Representatives Barrett. Barrett votes aye. Representatives Brooks. Brooks votes no. Carringer. Aye. Carringer votes aye. Darby. Aye. Darby votes aye. Dixie. No. Dixie votes no. Doggett. Yes. Doggett votes yes. Eldridge. Yes. Eldridge votes yes. Fritz. Aye. Fritz votes yes. Hakeem. No. Hakeem votes no. Hurt. Aye. Hurt votes yes. Johnson. No. Johnson votes no. Jones of Davidson.
I don't know why we can't even discuss the bill, colleagues. I don't know why we cannot ask simple questions of the sponsor.
Move on to the next vote, please.
Representatives Lynn.
I vote Jones is no. Jones is no. Votes no.
Mackenzie.
No.
Mackenzie votes no. Reedy.
Aye.
Reedy votes yes. Renault. Renault votes aye. Stevens. Stevens votes aye. Warner. Warner votes aye. Zachary. Zachary votes aye. Vice Chair Bolso. Vice Chair Bolso votes aye. Chair Todd.
Aye.
Chair Todd votes aye. Mr. Chair, you have 15 ayes and 6 noes.
Previous question prevails. We're now voting on the bill as amended. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Representatives Barrett. Barrett votes aye. Brooks. Brooks votes no. Carringer. Carringer votes aye. Darby. Darby votes aye. Dixie. Dixie votes no. Doggett. Doggett votes aye. Eldridge. Eldridge votes aye. Fritz. Fritz votes aye. Hakeem. Hakeem votes no. Hurt. Hurt votes aye. Johnson. No. Johnson votes no. Jones of Davidson.
They can't defend the bill. They only care about the lot of police, black and brown people. That's the only.
Jones votes no. Lynn. Lynn. Lynn votes aye. Mackenzie.
No.
Mackenzie votes no. Reedy. Reedy votes aye. Renault. Renault votes aye. Stevens. Stevens votes aye. Warner. Warner votes aye. Zachary. Zachary votes aye. Vice Chair Bolso. Vice Chair Bolso votes aye. Chairman Todd.
Aye.
Chairman Todd votes aye. The total is 15 ayes, 6 noes.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Motion carries. Bill moves on to finance. If there's no other business before the committee, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. We have a motion second. Without objection, we stand adjourned.